Hi, I'm Amy Rose White, an integrative psychotherapist making videos on improving mental and spiritual wellness. Today's topic is how to set a boundary and why is it so dang hard to do that? So, first, what is a boundary in the first place? I did not look up the Merriam Webster or Oxford dictionary version of the definition, so I'll just tell you what is my working definition of a boundary. It's a limit, it's a structure, it's a no, and it's a need. Could be all or one of those things. So it's really about what I will and will not tolerate or what I need to be able to do or engage or be in some other kind of scenario or with another person. It really is about what we will do, what we won't do, and it requires us to get really, really clear on the limits that we have in our psyches around our feelings and needs. Those might be our body requirements, like I can continue running this race if I have water. I know that doesn't sound like setting a boundary, but it is. It's I can't keep doing XYZ until I have certain needs met. And a boundary is so important because it's very loving and kind to have a boundary because it comes from a place of honesty and authenticity. And one of the reasons why it's so dang hard to set boundaries is that it requires a willingness to do the hard thing, the harder in the moment thing. I would argue it's harder over time not to have boundaries, but in the right now moment, doing the hard thing, having the hard conversation, it requires that we're willing to experience and tolerate the consequence of setting that boundary. And there is always inherent risk in doing that. We might be met with disapproval. We might be thought of as the bad guy or the rude girl or the B word if you're a woman. You may lose the relationship. I actually think that's the main motivating factor why people don't set boundaries in dynamics. And this could be with a stranger you see on the street or a clerk at the store or your parents or your child. Because so many of us are in need of that external locus of control, meaning what other people think of us, whether they like us, whether we're perceived as a good or nice person. We're more dependent on that than meeting our own kind of basic needs that include self-respect, self-honoring, self-trust, and love. So in the name of avoiding those uncomfortable conversations and doing that hard thing, the irony is that an ironic thing is that oftentimes no one wins because by hiding our authentic experience and our true desires and needs, we either become resentful of that other person or we build a pattern where other people don't expect us to have any boundaries or needs, and then we wonder why we feel so exploited. So sometimes just telling someone no allows them to get the fullness of who can give them the yes, or maybe it's us later. If we spread ourselves too thin and try to say yes to everyone and don't set boundaries, we also end up in a situation where nobody is actually pleased with us because we've tried so hard to do it all, which is really impossible, or say yes to everyone. We also don't want to build a pattern of self-betrayal that breaks down self-trust and leads to depression, anxiety, disease states. There's a wonderful book by Gabor Mate called When the Body Says No, which is an accumulation of data in the literature linking repressed emotions directly to certain disease states like cancer, heart disease, diabetes. So quite literally, not having a boundary psychically, emotionally, relationally results in our bodies actually setting the boundary for us. So that's one of the reasons why it's so important to learn this really, really significant skill. So how do you set a boundary? One, listen to your anger. Listen to your resentment. Anger is a wonderful, very important, essential emotion because it literally shows us where our boundaries lie. And without listening to that voice, even if it's just like a slight irritation, we don't know. We don't know what our needs are. We don't know what our feelings are. We don't know what our desires are if we don't listen to not just anger, but our entire emotional experience. It doesn't mean that we need to insist that we're always comfortable all the time or we never have negative emotion. But if you're experiencing, let's say, every time one of your parents makes a comment about your physical appearance or your body, you feel like murdering someone or like running away. If you have a big response to a chronic behavior, you probably need to set a boundary. That's probably really good information, because from there, you'll know what you require. And then we get into what do I say and the languaging part of it. So while I could speak for literally hours about examples of how to set boundaries, for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to give you a few. And then I'd love to see in the comments, what are your examples? How have you set boundaries? Where have you not set boundaries? What were the consequences of that? Okay, so some examples. I will need, so we use I statements when we set boundary. I will need you to lower your voice for me to be able to continue this conversation. So that's the verbal phase. Boundaries have two phases: verbal setting and body movement, what you do. So I can say, I need you to lower your voice to continue this conversation. If that person's voice lowers, we continue. If they cross the boundary that I've just set, I walk calmly away. Okay? The body part is actually almost as, if not more important than the verbal part. And that's where a lot of people struggle. They'll set the boundary with their kid. You know, you need to come home at midnight. And although I'm not a big fan of punishment with teens, there should be some natural logical consequence if that boundary is violated, right? But speaking as someone who often had many lazy moments as I was parenting my kids, you know, we get lazy. We don't hold the boundary. We get soft. We're worried, you know, they're going to be mad at us, or we can't handle the discomfort of them, like, you know, sulking around for a week because we held the consequence we said we would hold. But what happens when we don't hold that physical boundary, like if you tell your kid you're taking their phone, you better take their phone. I'm not actually a huge fan of that one, but whatever, you do you. For various reasons, they're going to not trust you, right? If you are not a person of your word, if you set a boundary and then you don't hold it, it kind of becomes meaningless. So remember that that's very important. Okay, other examples. When we come to visit you, we're going to stay at an Airbnb. So you didn't ask for permission. You're willing to tolerate the discomfort and the disappointment of perhaps your in-laws going, well, what do you mean? We have plenty of room. We can help with the dog. It's not a big deal. We'll be able to watch the kids. You know, like you just ignore that and you hold the boundary. And if it gets too intense with them insisting that that boundary isn't something they can handle, maybe you don't go. Again, I'm not telling you what to do, but these are examples of setting and then holding and maintaining boundaries. Once I was the speaker and mediator for a conference. And we brought in someone who was going to speak to a certain branch of medicine that I knew was going to be pretty controversial. And more people liked it than didn't. But one person who was a physician raised their hand and basically quite literally said, this is the biggest bunch of horse you-know-what that I've ever heard. So before our speaker responded, I grabbed the mic and said, we knew this would be, you know, a lively discussion and somewhat controversial in nature, and we really appreciate your questions. If your questions are going to be included, they must be respectful or you will be asked to leave. And I will admit, I was literally shaking like this while I said this, because it was a group of like hundreds of people and I was speaking to a male physician where I'm not the higher up in that power dynamic. He actually came to me after the conference and apologized, and I encouraged him to apologize to the speaker, not to me. But in any case, like that's one example where it's really hard to set the boundary, but when you do so, it makes everyone else feel safe because you've created structure around kind of things getting wild and out of control. So I'll just give you one more example. This might seem simple, but it's really a great one. I will start the meeting on time regardless of who is here at X designated time. So when you say you're going to start something on time and then you don't hold that boundary, what you're teaching people is they don't have to be on time. Everything we do teaches people where our boundaries are or are not. I hope this is helpful. Please let me know what you think. Where do you struggle with boundaries? Where are you nailing it in life with boundaries? I know it's taken me a lifetime to learn any of what I'm sharing with you right now, and I'm still practicing it all the time. Thank you so much for liking this video, for sharing, for subscribing. Truly, I appreciate you, each and every one of you. And until next time, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be safe. Bye for now.